Do you want your beats to hit harder than ever before? In this video, I'm walking you through the whole process with sound selection all the way to mastering your beats. I'm revealing the ultimate secrets to mixing and mastering in FL Studio that will make your tracks hit hard and loud. If you are ready to take your mixes from this all the way to this, make sure to stick around until the end. So let's get started with the first step, which is sound selection. So sound selection for me is two different parts. The first one being stylized and the second one being mix/frequency based. Stylized sound selection basically means you have a soul beat, you're picking sounds that fit the soul aesthetic. So that could be anything from trumpets to strings to pianos. So as an example, you wouldn't use a respace in a typical soul sample. You can obviously always break rules and create new genres in a way, but if you're doing a typical soul sample, there's not going to be a respace in there. So picking the sounds based on what fits the aesthetic you're doing right now or the type of beat you're making right now, that's for me stylized sound selection. And that's the first part. We are not going to talk about this today. We are going to talk about frequency-based sound selection. This basically just means this right here. The human ear has a frequency range from 20 Hertz all the way to 20,000 Hertz. This is like what the human ear can hear and perceive. If we're picking sounds, we want our sounds to overlap as little as possible. Just as a little disclaimer right here, these are just guidelines. There's obviously always going to be exception to rules. There's always going to be breaking the rules, but just as a guideline, this is how we're going to do it. We want our sounds to overlap as little as possible. So we might have a bass right here. We might have like a piano right here. And then we're going to have like, I don't know, a pad right here. And maybe like strings right here. So this will be completely fine. We have a little bit of overlap, but this is completely normal and okay. The problem happens if you stack sounds. So let's say this is our piano right here, and now we pull out a sound that sits in the same frequency range. It sits like this. And as you can see, there are like multiple sounds overlapping right here. And this means we're already gonna have like a little bit of like crowdedness in certain areas of our frequency range. And this is a problem that we will have to fix in the mix later. And we can fix that by utilizing different tools like EQs, like mono stereo, like panning stuff, reverbs. There's like a million different ways to get rid of these problems. I'm gonna call them problems right now. So if we would do it by the book, then we would have to pick sounds that overlap as little as possible, that have space. And this is also the reason if you see other tutorials on YouTube and people are saying go in with an EQ and cut like the lows out of a piano or cut like the lows out of anything so to make room for like an 808. This is exactly what they mean. As an example, let's say this is our 808. It's most likely like this, and we have a piano and the piano has like low notes and they might go like this, you know? A lot of people are saying, okay, you can cut this part out with an EQ. 808 has more space, it shines more, and the low end hits better. It's definitely one of the ways to deal with these problems. So now that we know this, we can actually go into our DAW and pick sounds. So I prepared a beat right here. As you can see, we already have the beat finished. We already have like the notes in there. We already have a sample picked out. But if I play it, you're only gonna hear the sample and the bass. So you're not gonna hear any drums. This is because there's no sound in here. And we're gonna pick these sounds together and we're gonna make sure to pick the right sounds and keep our frequency range in mind. If you're in FL Studio, on the top right here, you can press on this monitor and it's gonna show you the frequency range. So, picking sounds. I'm gonna use the Magic drum kit probably from Cymatics. You can get that for free on the free downloads page. I'm looking for something with low end, but also like a little bit of high end. I kind of like this actually. And like I said, there's nothing mixed yet. So we're gonna pick sounds, I'm gonna put it to a mixer track, and then we're gonna get to the next step. So next, let's go for a rim. I'm gonna turn this a little bit down because else it's gonna blast our ears. As you can see, these are already pre-mixed. That's like the thing with high quality drum sounds these days. They come pre-mixed, so you don't have to like compress them or anything. That's like what makes a high quality sound high quality, you know? You don't have to actually do a lot to these drum sounds to get a good sound out of them. Next for the clap. Let's try this one. So right now when I'm picking sounds, I'm thinking about, does it fit in the context of the beat? So this is more like a dancehall beat. This is like a little bit tropical, stuff like that. So that's why I picked the rim shot. Has a little bit of highs in there. As you can see, there's going to be a tambourine later. Some brighter sounds. So that's why I'm picking sounds the way I'm doing right now. Okay, the hi-hat. See, my automatic habits are always gonna come right here and instant level it, but I'm gonna try to keep it to a minimum because I wanna do it together with you guys in a bit. Next we have the tambourine, so I think I like this. And now we have, lastly, the perk. Let's try this one. Adds a little layer to the rim, which I kind of like. We also have this bass right here. It's from Analog Lab. It's the bass Hero Pop. I think it's the preset I made. It sounds like this. So lastly, we're gonna pick the 808. And for the 808, I'm looking for something very, very subtle. Like the 808 shouldn't be the focus on this beat. So not a lot of highs, a lot of lows, maybe something subby. That's like my thoughts right now. This might be it. It's okay. If you find the sound and it sounds okay, don't be scared to just keep looking, you know? Like sound selection can take a while. And I know it's like something a lot of producers don't like to do, but a good way to get better at this is to just keep looking for sounds. So if you haven't found a sound that like sounds perfect there, spend like a couple more minutes more, you know? And at the end of the day, if you still don't find anything after 20 minutes, then you can still go back and find the sound to use before. That's definitely something I had to do a long time. If you're wondering how I switch sound so fast, it's just the middle mouse button on a sound while the 808 is selected and it changes the sound instantly. Let's go with this one. It's a very basic 808, but it works great here and it's very subtle, something that I wanted, and I'm gonna tuck it down in the mix. So the sounds are pretty much picked right now. Let's listen to them together. This is obviously not leveled, but stylized, they fit very well together. They go with the sample, they go with the vibe, and they're very clear, transparent, which is something I look for when looking for high quality sounds. So now we go to the next part, which is probably the most important part, and that is step 2, leveling. So leveling, in my opinion, is probably the most important part of mixing, at least when it comes to like making beats. It's obviously a little bit different when you're making like whole songs and you have vocal production, all that. As you can see right here, all the sounds are here, the samples in here, no effects on there, nothing. And there are multiple ways to learn leveling and get better at it fast. Actually, there's just basically 2, at least 2 that I like. We've all probably heard of like pink noise and all this stuff, and it sounds maybe a little bit harsh, but in my opinion, it's pretty gimmicky. In my opinion, the best way to learn leveling is the old school way, having a reference track and switching between the reference and your beat and listening for the levels and putting on like adjusting the levels that way. I'm gonna show you guys an example right now. So because we're on YouTube, I can't really use like an official song because I'm also gonna get copy striked, but I'm gonna use just a random beat of mine. If you're picking a reference, in the best case scenario, you want to have something in the same genre, with the same vibe. So I have this beat right here, it's a different genre, it's just a beat. So what I want to do is put it to a mixer track. Right here I have a part of the beat, which is just playing the drums and the melody. It's not in the same BPM, that's not a problem because we are just listening for the levels. What I like to do is just have it on the playlist, and I like to have this little lock on here right here. You do that by holding shift and left clicking, and this basically allows you, if I turn all these off, or if I like solo this, it still stays on, you know? So I can just do this and the mix is playing. Right click this, it's gonna solo the reference. If I right click and left click it, we have the beat. There's probably better ways to do this. It's just something quick and easy that I like to do. So what I want to do is go element by element first, so to get a like rough idea, and then I will go in and fine tune it later. Let's start with the kick. By the way, you can also do this right here in the playlist. So if we are in the mixer, so if we go here, put the lock right here, you can do the same thing. Now you can play the sample or like the beat. So the snare and the kick are definitely like the most upfront dominant parts. So we're gonna copy that basically. I have to put a little disclaimer right here. We have a section coming up for the master chain. As you can see, there's nothing on here right here. In a normal setting, I would build a beat and mix and level into a master chain. So I would already have the master chain on my master while making the beat. It's just something like a lot of like mix engineers do. The reason being is that, let's say I make like a perfect level, I put the perfect levels right here, and then I put a master chain on. It's gonna like the dynamics are gonna change and it's gonna move the levels a little bit. And that means I have to go back in and kinda level it again. I have to fine tune it again. And to skip that step, you can just mix and level into your master chain. It's something I do. You don't have to do it. I won't do it in this tutorial because I want to show the master chain at the end, but it's something I normally do. So right now we have this kick and this rim shell. If I listen right here, The snare is even a little bit louder than right here. I have some layers right here. So I have like this rim and this percussion. They're basically building the snare. What you can do is take both of these and send them to a bus. This means you could just go right here, right click on this little icon down here, on this little arrow, and then route to this track only. Now we have like a snare bus, if you would do it, like call it correctly, you know? The reason you can do this, you don't have to. The reason you can do it is that, so let's say we want this percussion to be less dominant in the snare. And now we can just raise the level of the whole thing. This way, if you want to like make the snare louder, then you don't have to mess with both these levels and you can just pull it right here. It's just something quick you can do. You don't have to. Damn, I really put the snare really loud here. I'm not gonna lie. Okay, kick and snare are roughly done. Let's listen for the sample. So this is how you would mix using a reference. So you just keep going and listening for single sounds, and then all the other elements should be similar. So in this case right here, it's like kick, snare, sample, hi-hat. In the order they are like the loudest / the quietest. So we just want to copy that and get like a little bit there, like from the relationships of like the loudness. This is so weird to explain. So yeah. In my opinion, that's the best way, the fastest way to get better at leveling. A tip I can give you is just sit down, pick like 15, 20 of your favorite songs and the genre that you're making, download them, put them in a folder, and every time you're making a beat, just pull them in for like 2 minutes, you know, and just listen really quick. Am my kicks hitting the same? Are my snares hitting the same? Is my sample loud enough? You know, you don't have to go like step by step and do everything like that. Just like get a rough idea. The context is really important, like realizing, okay, this is how everything sounds, and burning that into your brain. Because then at some point, that's the next thing, you don't need this anymore. If you mixed like, let's say 100 beats in a certain genre, at some point, you're not gonna need a reference anymore. You know how loud this kick should be. It's just a feeling, you know? But to get to that point, the fastest is definitely reference leveling. And that's why I'm like not a fan of like pink noise. It's like, it seems very gimmicky to me. I tried it a couple times, I'm not gonna lie. I used to do it when I was like younger, or like when I first started out. But it's just like, I don't know, not the way. So, in my opinion, this is the most important part. In most cases, you can get away with just this. Right now, if you listen to this beat, it sounds transparent, nothing is clashing. We could call it a day. If you want to go an extra mile and actually start mixing, because this isn't really mixing, you know, it's just like leveling and picking decent sounds. The next step you could do is obviously panning, effects, and the master chain. I'm going to start with panning. So for panning, there are rules to this. It doesn't really matter. I'm not going to lie to you. The theory behind it is you used to pan like a drum set, you know. I'm not the biggest drum set guy, but like you have your kick right here, you have your snare right here, your hi-hats right here, open hats right here, and the toms, ta-ta-ta, you know. And that's your drum set. I'm sure there's like different ways to set it up, but you would pan your drums in the DAW the same way the drum set is set up. And there are two ways to do it. Either out of the drummer's perspective, this is right here, you are the drummer, so the hi-hat is going to be on the right side, so we pan the hi-hat right, we pan the open hat left, we have the toms like this, kick and snare are front center. That's the first thing. The next thing is out of the perspective of the audience, so the audience is right here, so that means you would do everything the other way around. That is like the idea behind it, for like panning like drums, you know? I'm not gonna lie to you, nobody gives a shit, at least in my opinion. And I'm sure there's going to be like critics out there, but panning for me is something to keep the listener interested and to make your mix more transparent. So if I pan something to the right, it's not going to take up as much space on the left side or in the middle, and this way you can like clear up the mix a little bit. What I like to do with drums is just like, I like to pan the hi-hat right just a little bit. It's a little bit of like old school stuff. I just like to do it, and the rest is completely open. I like to pan the open head to the left sometimes. I have beats where I have like them going left and right and crazy and stuff. It's just like not that deep. What is deep though is you can use panning also to keep the listener interested. You know, we all have like these songs where like the guitar guitar pans from left to right and like slide or something, you know? And you can use it as like a style element. And like I said, you can use it to clear up the mix. So that's what panning is. In this beat here, personally, I would probably don't even do that much. This is already panned. I mean, there's obviously not much to pan right here because I'm using a sample, so there's no instruments to pan. So you could make this wider, but we're gonna get to that. If you're like making a melody, you can obviously widen your stereo field by panning. So you have synth going left, you have piano going like center right, and like a guitar there, and you know, and you actually widen your stereo field using panning. In this case, it's not really necessary. So that is panning. So the next step is gonna be effects. When thinking about effects, I think of two different phases. I'm thinking about the first phase, which is making the signal sound clean, transparent, and the second one being creative, like using effects in a creative way. So for the first part, we have this melodic, like the sample right here that I made. As you are gonna see, there's like nothing on here. So these are like the 5 sounds. There's 1 EQ on all 5 sounds. And that is because the sample doesn't need that much. If we listen to this is just noise. Then we have a tom. It plays in the lower notes, or like in the lower part of the frequency range, lower mids maybe. We have the bass. These could overlap a little bit, but except on these 2 notes right here, they're not really playing at the same time, so the overlapping is not that deep. And then we have these 2 things right here. First up, the chords, which don't really play in the mids, and we have this right here, which is the perk. So all of these sounds have like designated spaces, and that's why there's not gonna be a lot of like cleaning up to do, because there's nothing to clean up, you know? Why would I put like an EQ on like, let's say, the lows on this, you know? It really doesn't really have lows. Sure, there's like something, but it's not really like disturbing like the other sounds. So that's why there's not a lot going on. To get back to the beginning, this is why sound selection is key. The better your sound selection, the less mixing you have to do, just because like your sounds are gonna fit into the frequency range like a puzzle. It's gonna fit perfectly. And as soon as like you have problems, that's when you have to go in and maybe EQ something, or maybe like pan something. But yeah, right here, this is all that it is on there. It's just like 1 EQ, and it just dips down a little bit on the lower mids because it's just a little bit like resonant right here. And I just didn't like the resonant sound, so I just dipped down a little bit. So for the second part, we have creative effects. So creative mixing can be a lot of things. It can be effects chains that you put on the sound to completely transform it. It can be a pan man that goes from left to right. It can be a certain reverb that like makes the sound like it's in a warehouse. There's a lot of things that you can like creatively mix, you know? One thing I like to do is drum compression, or like drum bass mixing. So what I would do is I pick all of my drum sounds, just send it to one track right here, and then right here I would put effects on here. So we have a drum master right here. All the drum sounds are going in here. Now we can add effects to make it sound clearer, more like compressed, glued together. So what I would like to do is like add like a compressor. And right here, we're just looking for something to glue the stuff together. So we don't want like crazy compression. We want like a small ratio, and we just like want to do a little bit to glue. You can also use like presets. As an example, you have like these glue presets right here. And then you can obviously turn it back a little bit. You could slam it. But like I said, we don't want this to do a lot. We just want this to glue the pieces a little bit together so it sounds more like a coherent like drum sample or drum loop. You can also add, as you can saw, it clipped a little bit. So you can add a soft clipper at the end, just to give it some warm clipping instead of like harsh clipping. You can also add an EQ on the drum bass just to accentuate some sounds or to like get rid of some like nasty frequencies. Or just overall to balance it a little bit more. What I like to do is add some highs. Give that a little bit of like crunch, like bite at the top. This would belong to the first phase, clean mixing, or like making stuff sound transparent and clean. Something creative for now would be parallel compression, adding stuff like auto chroma, even like illusion, and just like creative stuff. So as an example, we could use auto chroma. What you could do is just get like a random preset. And then we can just drag the audio file, and then we can delete auto chroma again. And now we have like a layer of our drums that sound a little bit crazy, you know? And And now we can go in and mix this under our drums. We can use this to like add fills or something. And we can even just go in and turn this into like stuff, you know. We can pitch this down, turn this down, pitch it. Give our drums some depth and some uniqueness instead of just being like cookie cutter drums. Something else that I like to do is like use Diablo like this on master. You can also use like presets right here. In Diablo you have like basically everything from like crunch, like the bite that I added to the EQ, to like punch, to boost, to saturation, to body like sounding fuller. And we can also use this to like parallel compress. It's not real parallel compression, it's just like what I like to call it. We could just like turn this all the way up, you know, and go really crazy and make it like super crunchy, super like fucked up. And then you can go in and add to it using the mix knob, you know? And this also is just gonna add depth to your sound. You know, you can make your drums sound more like gritty, a little bit nasty. So that is like creative mixing. If you're more interested in like the melodic part of creative mixing, I've already made a video on like the whole thing, breaking down different effects chains and just how to break plugins and how to like take sounds and make them your own. There's a video on the channel already, so if you wanna check that out, I'm just gonna link it down in the description. And if you want to try out Diablo, make sure to stay until the end of the video because I have a free source. I have some freebies for you guys, so you can actually try it out for yourself for free. So the next step and the last step would be adding a master chain. Like I said in the beginning, disclaimer, normally I add a master chain before. I'm just going to do it for like this for the video. The master chain. There are so many discussions about this. Some people like to add just a soft clipper and be done with it. And these are like beats, you know? So you're sending these beats to artists, they're gonna hop on it, gonna send it out to a mix engineer, and he's gonna completely mix it, and then it's gonna go to a mastering engineer. So your mix is not gonna survive. So don't overthink this master chain. You can also add a soft clipper and a limiter, and then just do a ceiling of like 0.1 on the top right here. You can see it right here. It's a ceiling 0.1, and then you can just move in gain. This way you get your beat to sound louder in the studio. This is always something people underestimate. In the studio, your beat needs to hit. So if rappers are sitting in the studio, they need it loud. So a limiter might not be a bad thing, you know? So something you could do. If you're wondering, the order in which you put these effects does really matter. If we're thinking about a signal flow in FL Studio, it's our sounds start right here. They go to a mixer track, which is assigned right here. They go through all this, through the EQ, come down on the bottom right here, come in on top and go down all the way. If this Fruity Soft Clipper is here to take like the distortion, we get distortion. The distortion goes into the Fruity Soft Clipper first, which is what we want because this is gonna give us this warm distortion, right? Instead of like the hard clipping. So it's gonna give us soft clipping. So if we would put that below the Fruity limiter, it wouldn't basically do nothing because this Fruity limiter is made that the ceiling goes to minus 0.1 dB. So at that point it's not clipping. So the soft clipper barely works, you know? So the order in which you put these plugins is important. You gotta think about that. Easy master is always soft clipper, limiter, ceiling to 0.1 dB. Don't really have to touch the other stuff right now. And just move a little bit of gain in there. And there's an easy trick to do this. You just take the gain and you just go a lot. And then you just move it down and you listen to like your kick or like your snare, most likely the kick. So that's an easy way to like know how much gain you should put in and what is too much. First thing you do, just do too much, you know? This is too much. As you can see, like your kick is gone basically, the snare is all the way up there and the percussion as well. So right here, you are gonna turn down the gain and you're just gonna listen until the kick appears again and the kick starts to get like some body again and starts to like hit again. And then you're just gonna move it back a little bit and then you have your perfect gain. Something like this, you know, and now we just got like gained like 5 dB. As you can tell already, like I said in the disclaimer, this is gonna change the levels of your beat, you know, the snare is much louder now if we compare this. And this is because like the dynamics of it, you know? So this is why I would have to go in now and adjust a little bit to fix it. This is why you mix into a master chain. So we can obviously turn this up a notch. What I like to do is I always like to have an EQ. I like to use the mix rack from Slate Digital, and sometimes I like to have a Soothe and a mix, like a compressor. So I use the C2 as a compressor and I use Sooth sometimes. So why do I do this? So first up, the compressor. The compressor is similar to the drum bus. It's just something to glue everything a little bit together. I like to use presets. You can also just dial it in like this. So if I would dial it in like this, so for the compressor, we are just looking to reduce the peaks a little bit and to glue it a little bit together. So the dynamics are not like the kick is right here and it's like the melody is right here, you know? So to just get everything a little bit tighter together. You can also just use presets for that, you know? Like I said, you can use the transient extraction, something like this. You can also use the groovy glue. Very nice. This is just what I like to do sometimes. The mix track. This is pretty simple. I always use the same preset. It's either mix bus fat or mix bus punch, depending on what I'm doing. And I'm not actually doing a lot right here. So first up, as you can see, this is going crazy. So we're gonna turn down the input a little bit to not run it into the red the whole time. What I like to do is make sure this doesn't run in the red. I don't really use this right here. I don't really, sometimes I use this and I don't really use that. And then use the trimmer. So it looks like this, and then I use the air one, and then I just go in. And give it a little bit of highs, because in this case it's not necessary because like we use a lot of highs. But me personally, my beats always, or like my melodies seem to like miss some high frequencies, and I'm just like using this air preset to give it some highs, you know, and I feel like this air plugin or like this air strip sounds the best. In this case, I wouldn't even do it because it sounds good enough. The EQ is just there to get the last bits of juice out of the sample or out of the beat. So I'll go in right here and find the frequencies I'm not really fond of. Right, I think that are unbalanced. I'm just using this EQ to balance the beat a little bit more. And as you can see, it's like not even, it's like 1 dB, you know? So I'm not doing anything crazier. So I'm not doing stuff like this right here, you know? Or like stuff like this, never. I'm just using like a dB, a little bit, boosting stuff, just to a little bit balance it out. And lastly, the Sooth. Sooth is goated for everything. I'm using this preset right here, I love it, balance the Grammys. Like I said, to balance it a little bit, but mostly I use it for samples when I have like too much low end. I use this low mid rescue preset. Save my lower mids with that, because I have a bad habit of using too many low mids. But yeah, that is basically my effects chain. It looks like this most of the time. Sometimes there's like another compressor in here, sometimes not, sometimes no EQ, but this is basically the base of it. And this is obviously just for beats. So if I would make full songs, that would obviously look different because the goal is something different. So this is the whole mixing process from sound selection all the way to creating your master. Right now you can just bounce it out and you're basically done. If you watched so far, I want to thank you. I hope the video helped. If you want to use Diablo, the light version, for free, you can check the link in the description. It's insane if you're really trying to make your drums hit, to give you like drums that grit, to like really glue together your drum master or like your drums. You can try that out for free. It looks the same, feels the same, sounds the same. It's definitely easier to use, but yeah, definitely get that. I hope you guys enjoyed this. If you want stuff more like this, a little bit more in depth, let me know in the comments. And that's about it. See you guys in the next one.